Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. I'm your host Benjamin Lee, and welcome aboard the Eastern Express. On this episode, we're taking a look at the hermit kingdom of Central Asia. Turkmenistan is dusting off the golden statues and stepping into the geopolitical spotlight. After decades of neutrality and navel-gazing, Turkmenistan is suddenly a popular kid at the diplomacy lunch table. Russia, Iran, and even the United States are vying for its attention. Now, this begs the question of whether this is a new era or just old authoritarianism in a snazzy new sheepskin hat. From gas pipelines to Turkic pride, we're unpacking why Turkmenistan's been speed-dialed by every regional power in sight. So, without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
Turkmenistan is seeking to break its diplomatic isolation and become a player on the world stage, much like several of its Central Asian neighbors. Over the last few years, the country has been taking part in several different summits involving not just regional partners, but also world players such as Russia and China. Turkmenistani officials have also held phone calls with the US Secretary of State, as it seems that major powers are interested in what Turkmenistan has to offer. And it has quite a lot to offer. Its strategic location by the Caspian Sea and the trans-Caspian trade routes along with its rich gas supply mean that Turkmenistan is a key state when it comes to influencing the region. This shift coincided with the rise to power of Serdar Berdimuhamedov, the son of former Turkmenistani leader and strongman Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov. In the wake of the son's ascendancy to the presidency, key Russian advisors departed the country, and Turkmenistan embarked on a political journey to break its status as a quasi-hermit kingdom. Gurbanguly Berdimuhamedov is a far more controversial figure. As president, he facilitated a cult of personality along with reported corruption and acted like a dictator. The former president still holds much sway over the country's policy, such as legislation and control over various government branches. He also undertakes foreign visits in an official capacity. So while Turkmenistan is opening itself up diplomatically, it seems hesitant to abandon its authoritarian past.
And now, let's zone in on the East-splaining portion of our show. Turkmenistan is often compared to North Korea due to the absolute power held by its leaders and the immense restrictions imposed on its population. Nonetheless, in recent years, it has been trying to open up and have its share of Central Asia's rising importance.
When looking at scenes from Turkmenistan's capital, one word comes to mind: dystopian. While the average Turkmen often lives in what would commonly be regarded as poverty, the government invests millions into building monumental symbols to its country's supposed power and wealth. Corruption is reportedly rampant, and a single family essentially holds all the power. It is unlike many other countries in the region, despite being a former Soviet republic like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kyrgyzstan. The other Central Asian countries have, more or less, been pursuing democratic paths. While the people from these countries often migrate abroad in search for work, or between one another, Turkmenistan remains isolated, and cultural exchange between it and its neighbors has historically been very low. Unlike, say, Kazakhstan, it has not been inclined to pursue diplomatic diversification, although this may be changing given its heightened presence on the world stage. Politically, throughout its history, Turkmenistan has heavily relied on Russia, although it has maintained relations with Iran to the south.
And now, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. For most of its post-Soviet existence, Turkmenistan has been the Central Asian wallflower. Fabulously wealthy in natural gas, but politically cloistered, rigidly neutral, and ruled by a family dynasty that makes North Korea look calm by comparison. But lately, things are shifting. In the past few months, Ashgabat has welcomed Russia's Lavrov, Iran's Araghchi, and even got a call from America's Secretary of State Marco Rubio. All three powers, Moscow, Tehran, and Washington, have dialed in because Turkmenistan matters again. So why this sudden popularity? Well, reason one is geography. Turkmenistan borders Iran and Afghanistan, sits on the Caspian Sea, and is a key link between the east-west and north-south trade corridors. When China needs to move stuff to Europe and avoid Russia, it's got two real options: through Kazakhstan or through Turkmenistan. And with Moscow burning bridges, the latter is looking more attractive. Reason number two, natural gas. Ashgabat sits on the fourth largest reserves in the world, and unlike Russia, hasn't yet launched a full-scale invasion of its neighbors. Now that's a plus for Western buyers. Reason number three, a changing domestic scene. In 2022, the son became the father. Serdar Berdimuhamedov succeeded his dad Gurbanguly and began cautiously opening up. Now, Serdar is no liberal, but he is pragmatic. Under him, Turkmenistan has leaned into transit diplomacy, deepened ties with China, and warmed up to Turkey in a way that screams one nation, two states, Central Asia edition. Turkmenistan isn't a loyal Kremlin client, it's hedging. The PRC gets gas contracts, the Americans get phone calls, the Iranians get border cooperation, and Turkey gets the brotherhood treatment. Everyone gets a little, but no one gets too much. With Russia bogged down in Ukraine, Iran sanctioned into a corner, and China playing long ball, Turkmenistan sees a window. It's playing everyone off of everyone else, hosting diplomats, opening borders, and pulling back just enough to keep Moscow from throwing a tantrum. Still, the West should remain skeptical. Turkmenistan's opening isn't a diplomatic thaw, it's a strategic pivot. Ashgabat is scared of instability, regardless whether it's stemming from Afghanistan, from poverty, from discontent at home. If engaging with the world helps the regime survive, it'll do it. But let's not confuse desperation for reform. If Sardar feels safe, we might see a more open Turkmenistan, one that leverages its geography and gas to become a real transit hub. If he feels threatened, the gates will slam shut. The golden statues will smile harder, and we'll be back to neutrality and indoor fountains. But one thing is for sure, the age of ignoring Turkmenistan is over. And now, here to shed more light on the issue is Bruce Panier, a board member of the Caspian Policy Center. Hello, sir, and welcome to Eastern Express.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here as always.
So today we're once again taking a look at Turkmenistan, and well, after years being in this shell, it suddenly decides to kind of open up its diplomatic efforts. What pushed the countries to break from decades of isolation in this particular timing?
Well, there's actually some good reasons. It's been a mismanaged country for a long time. I think it's finally starting to dawn on them that they don't really have any friends. Most of their revenue is state income is based on gas sales, and they don't have very many customers at the moment. And plus that they're kind of at the mercy of some of the bigger powers in the region. I mean, they border Iran. Russian is a Caspian Sea neighbor, I suppose. And then, of course, China's put a lot of investment into Turkmenistan that Turkmenistan's unable to pay back. So someone finally figured out that it's not helping them to keep this isolation policy they've had for decades now, and they're going to have to reach out and get some foreign partners if they're going to keep their economy and their people alive.
And you mentioned earlier that, well, gas is perhaps the only leverage that country really has. But do you think that its geography is also somewhat turning it into a prize when it comes to foreign relations as well?
That would make sense. Obviously, if you look at the map and look at where Turkmenistan is and look at the trade routes that people are trying to expand at the moment, the Middle Corridor or Trans-Caspian, whichever you prefer. There's north-south routes that come from Russia and go all the way down into Iran and to Iranian ports and over to India. I mean, Turkmenistan is in a great position to take advantage of this, if for nothing else, just from transit fees, right? But unfortunately, it's been an isolationist country for a long time. I mean, it was until just a couple years ago, if you drove a truck through Iran to the Turkmen border, that truck had to be totally unloaded, reloaded onto a truck that had Turkmen drivers, because they don't trust foreigners very much, and then shipped to the next border, Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, where it would have to be unloaded again, reloaded onto other trucks, and then sent further on down the line. Things like that discourage trade. People find other routes that are going to be much faster. And Turkmenistan has had a long time. It's been a long time for them anyway to catch up to the reality of what's going on. Their policies of keeping isolationist and trying to keep foreign contact to a minimum don't work when you could potentially be a trade hub and like I said, claim a lot of money just off the transit fees for goods coming through your country.
Right, but a lot of the political power in the country is maintained specifically because of the isolationism. Do you think that, the powers that being in the country would allow the actual kind of opening up to foreign people or even foreign ideas?
They certainly haven't shown any willingness to do that. It's kind of a strange balancing act they're doing. I mean, I used the example of trucks a while ago. Well, they finally relented just a couple of years ago and decided, okay, at least trucks coming from certain countries, other Central Asian countries, when they got to the border, they didn't have to unload. They could still drive through, but they had to be escorted by Turkmen police or security services in their cars in front. So, they're trying to make some adjustments. that maintain to the greatest degree possible their policies of isolationism, understanding that they have to, if they want to participate in this great position they're in terms of global trade, they're going to have to do something about loosening the rules and regulations of moving goods across Turkmenistan. So while they're not showing any sign of trying to implement any kind of reform, certainly no domestic reforms whatsoever, they are trying to do their best to do the bare minimum of opening up their country to trade, with the understanding that they really don't want foreigners to stay in their country for very long. So they should get through the country with their, whatever they're hauling, whatever goods they have, and move on to another country as fast as possible.
Right, and being an isolated country sort of have the benefit of defaulting them to a neutral country status. Do you think that now it's being opened up a little bit, they will be, well, forced to pick a side in kind of who they want to deal with?
You know, it shouldn't affect their neutrality status, and I'm glad you brought that up. Of course, this is what Turkmenistan is using for its isolationism. In 1995, the UN granted Turkmenistan the status, official status as a neutral nation, so that they don't get involved really in too many blocs or any big partnerships. I mean, they have bilateral relationships with a number of countries, but they avoid certainly military and security blocs. They won't join any of those. That shouldn't be affected at all. I mean, they can still maintain that status if that's what they want. Then they can keep that. But again, they're going to have to adjust their policies, and they're going to have to be more receptive to some counter proposals from some of these other countries. One of the things that's hurt them a lot, certainly with gas sales, is they want gas. They want to sell their gas on their terms. Well, a lot of people sell gas. You know, and Turkmen terms are essentially boiled down to this: we have gas, we have interior pipeline network. We will sell you the gas at our border. So if you want to buy our gas, you have to build a gas pipeline to our border, and then we'll sell it to you. You know, in China's case, that worked. But a lot of countries are not really interested in hearing this. It's held up a Trans-Caspian pipeline. It's held up pipelines to other areas. They've kind of made an exception for this Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline that they've been hoping to build for 30 years, where Turkmen Gas is actually the operator of the project, but the project isn't making any progress. So, they're a victim of their own policies. They're going to have to, what foreign companies want from Turkmenistan to do business is onshore contracts. Turkmenistan will let people explore for oil and gas in the Caspian Sea, but they won't let them set up operations on the huge gas fields inside Turkmenistan. And so a lot of foreign investors are not really interested. If the deal is you can buy our gas at our price if you build a pipeline to our border, but you can't share in any of the profits from, the big profits from actually developing the gas fields and sending it from point one all the way to its end point. Most companies just say it's not a lucrative contract. There's nothing of interest in this deal for us. So, the Turkmen's government anyway has been obstinate in this, and they're getting paid back by other countries that just are tired of hearing the same story for 30 years when they try to deal with Turkmenistan.
All right, but given the country's track record and their kind of avoidance of foreigners and foreign ideas, do you think that this is a real opening that we're observing right now, or do you think it's a more temporary thing and more for PR, be it foreign or domestic?
Well, the nature of gas sales is that it's going to have to be long-term. Most contracts for gas sales are signed at 20, 30-year contracts. So it's got to, if the changes that are coming are going to have to be at least long-term and probably permanent. So there's no reason to believe that whatever adjustments they make in the near future will be gone in 5 years if everything works out. I mean, you got to sell your gas. So, we're going to have to see what kind of deals they can reach with some of these countries, but they're going to have to be a lot more receptive and flexible in trying to reach some kind of agreements. They can't keep all the big money for themselves. Sometime they're going to have to relent and let some of the other countries in on this big potential gas pot they got. So anyway, to get back to your point about the foreign relationships, yes, they're loosening them up because they're at a dead end. Right now in their relationship. China is buying as much. China is they're really their only big gas customer right now. And China buys about 35 billion cubic meters of gas a year from Turkmenistan. There's no sign that China is going to build this fourth pipeline and increase that. So that's it for Turkmenistan. That's it. Now, the next customers that Turkmenistan have are only buying a little small amount of gas. They have a tentative or a deal that's supposed to be working to ship Turkey 2 billion cubic meters of gas maybe a year, 1.5 billion cubic meters. They have another deal with Iraq that's a swap deal with Iran, and this is where the foreign policy comes in, because the deal is they were going to ship 10 billion cubic meters of their gas to Iran via a gas pipeline that already exists, and that Iran would use its gas and send 10 billion cubic meters to Iraq, and then Iraq would pay Turkmenistan for the gas. However, the conflict in Iran in June, when Iran got bombed, of course, threw a wrench into that deal too. So now that's unclear. It was just getting off the ground, and now we don't know if that's going to be able to continue or not, because there's a lot of questions about the internal security of Iran's pipeline network. So, I mean, Turkmenistan has had to reach out and be nice all of a sudden to countries like the United States and countries that are usually in European countries that it usually doesn't deal with, because they don't want to have to hear about human rights, the numerous human rights violations in Turkmenistan. So they haven't dealt with them. And now they're faced with very few choices. If they want to expand operations, if they want to keep revenue coming in and get more revenue, they're going to have to do something different than they've been doing.
Do you think this is going to introduce any sort of cultural shock? Like you mentioned, they really don't want to address like the human rights issues or a lot of kind of Western ideas. The fact that, well, it's potentially becoming a transit hub. Do you see any kind of long-term political influence in that front?
It should work that way. Turkmenistan, it's not that no foreigners get into Turkmenistan, for example. You could be one of 15,000 tourists who annually visit Turkmenistan. When you get there, you are given a guide who makes sure that you don't actually mingle with the people. And that's kind of been their policy, unfortunately, is if for some reason you do get inside Turkmenistan, you don't get to just move around the country or even around the big cities alone. You're going to be watched all the time. That policy will probably continue. So it's unfortunate. I've been to Turkmenistan long ago, many times. The people are absolutely fabulous. They're very kind, fun to be with. But the government doesn't want you to meet with them anymore at all. And to the best of their abilities, they prevent any foreigner from having any contact with their own citizens. So, it's tough. The fact that they're trying to open up as a trade hub should actually kind of bring them out of their isolationism. And it will a little bit, but every time that they loosen the reins on dealing with foreigners, they tighten them somewhere internally so that their own people don't really have much access to foreigners, certainly foreign media, foreign tourists, people like that.
And last but not least, I'm hoping to try to connect some dots when it comes to geopolitics. And we're wondering whether Russia's war in the Ukraine have any sort of impact on Turkmenistan's foreign policy.
It's been a problem for Turkmenistan in this very strange way. I've mentioned the Trans-Caspian pipeline. This is a deal that's been around for 30 years. And the deal is that they're supposed to build a pipeline across the bottom of the Caspian Sea and get all the way to Azerbaijan and then put it into pipelines and ship it to Europe. And it's up to 30 billion cubic meters of gas, which is a fair amount of gas. Russia and Iran both objected to this. Now, Russia objects even more to the idea of a Trans-Caspian pipeline at the moment because they were the major gas exporter to Europe. I mean, they were, 160,000 billion cubic meters of, 160 billion cubic meters of gas annually to European countries. So that's all cut off. Almost all of it's been cut off. So the last thing in the world they want to see now from Turkmenistan is to resurrect this idea of a Trans-Caspian pipeline and start selling their gas. So, Turkmenistan's still at the mercy of Russia. Every time Turkmenistan looks to ship its gas west, Russia finds some way to try to block that. And now I might add, too, that Russia is even trying to block Turkmenistan from selling a lot of its gas to China. The gas pipelines I mentioned that China built to Turkmenistan can hold, at the moment, they can hold 55 billion cubic meters of gas annually, its capacity. Turkmenistan has 35 billion cubic meters to that. The other 10 billion are given over to Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, through whose territory the pipelines pass. However, Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan have had a hard time with gas production, and they're actually importing natural gas from Russia. So, since Russia has so much gas, what they figured they would do is each of those countries has 10 billion cubic meters of empty capacity in this pipeline. So why not put Russian gas into that pipeline and sell it to China? Well, Turkmenistan would also like to. Turkmenistan has more than enough gas to fill 20 billion cubic meters more of gas, but that they didn't work a deal out for that. Instead, Russia moved in, and it's shipping its gas through the pipelines that China built to Turkmenistan to export Turkmen gas to China. But now part of that gas is coming from Russia. So I know it's a complicated story, but you can see where, once again, Turkmenistan's been outflanked by the Kremlin.
Yeah, so like you said, a lot of moving pieces there. But in the meantime, it'll be really interesting to find out what is going to happen next to the country that has just opened itself up. In the meantime, thank you so much for your input and insight, and thanks for being with us on Eastern Express.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
Cheers. And now we're moving on to the Eastern News Flash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you don't want to miss. Some Ukrainian opposition lawmakers and observers warned that Ukraine has taken a wrong turn when it comes to fighting corruption. Ukraine's parliament passed a bill which severely hinders the independence of the country's leading anti-corruption institutions.
According to the new law, the country's prosecutor general will have new powers over investigations conducted by the Ukrainian National Anti-Corruption Bureau, as well as any other cases led by the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. For example, the Prosecutor General could now close an investigation at the request of legal defense, or they could reassign investigations externally of the agencies. The latest bill is yet another step in Ukrainian authorities' efforts to ramp up pressure on those agencies, which were established as part of the anti-graft reforms in the wake of the Euromaidan revolution. The law was passed with a strong majority, only 13 MPs voted against it, and another 13 abstained. The bill will now go to the president's office.
Russia has tripled the success rate of its drone strikes against Ukraine. Reports indicate that Russian Shahed drones now fly too high for Ukrainian mobile gunners to shoot them down.
According to a report by the Financial Times, Russian drone strikes have been breaking through Ukrainian defenses at triple the previous rates. This breakthrough has apparently been achieved through new swarm methods and high-altitude maneuvers. Compared to the period between January and March 2025, the proportion of Shahed drones hitting their targets rose from 5 to 15% in the period from April to June. This dramatic increase in success rate is reportedly due to a shift in Russian drone tactics and does not mean a decline in Ukraine's defense capabilities. For the last several months, Russia has been working on modifying Iranian-designed Shahed drones, which it can now manufacture domestically. These upgrades were intended to make the drones harder to intercept by truck-mounted machine guns and standard mobile fire units, which the Ukrainian army often deploys against them.
And that's all on this episode of Eastern Express. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.